I was invisible to her for years, and now she sleeps next to me every night. It sounds like a dream, right? The kind of thing you only hear about in movies or fairy tales. But believe me, it was anything but simple. There were days when just seeing her smile from across the room was enough to light up my entire world. Days when I thought, maybe if I changed a little more, became someone better, she'd finally notice me. But she didn't, not at first. To her, I was just a shadow, a friend of a friend, a nobody. I can't tell you how many nights I stayed up, replaying every conversation, every look she gave to someone else, wondering what they had that I didn't. And then, life threw us together in a way I never expected. Circumstances, fate, call it what you want. But suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. It started slow, a glance that lasted a second too long, a joke only we seemed to understand, a comfort I never thought I'd find with her. Before I knew it, she wasn't just someone I admired from afar. She was my world, my heartbeat, the reason I woke up smiling. Now, every night, when I feel her breathing next to me, when I run my fingers through her hair while she dreams, I have to remind myself that this is real, that somehow, someway, she's mine. But I almost lost her forever. One mistake, one moment of fear, and everything almost slipped right through my fingers. If you think love is enough to keep someone, you're wrong. Love, it's fragile. It's messy. It demands more than feelings. It demands everything. This is the story of how I almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me, and what it took to find my way back to her. If I close my eyes, I can still smell the old hallways of Eastwood High, the mix of cheap cafeteria pizza over wax floors and teenage ambition hanging thick in the air. Back then, I was a quiet one, the kid no one really noticed. You know the type? Hair always a little too messy, hoodie sleeves a little too long, my backpack weighed down more by books than dreams. I sat in the back of every classroom, blending into the chipped paint on the walls. I wasn't invisible exactly, but no one ever looked twice. And then there was her, Lena Matthews. God, even her name sounded like sunlight. She wasn't just popular. She owned every room she walked into. Captain of the cheer squad, honor roll student. The girl who somehow made a varsity jacket and a messy ponytail look like high fashion. When she laughed, the world leaned in to listen. When she smiled, it felt like even the coldest mornings warmed up a little. And me, I was just background noise. I remember one afternoon in sophomore year. It was raining hard, and the parking lot turned into a small ocean. I stood by the lockers, stuffing my notebooks into my backpack, when I caught sight of her, laughing with her friends, spinning under the downpour like it was her own private stage. Drops of rain clung to her eyelashes like tiny diamonds. In that moment, she wasn't just beautiful, she was unreachable. A comet blazing across my ordinary sky. She didn't even know my name. And I memorized hers like a prayer. Every day, I watched her from a distance, sitting across the cafeteria, 2 worlds apart, passing her in the hallway and catching a whiff of her vanilla shampoo, cheering for the team at football games, secretly just cheering for her. I built 100 different conversations in my head. Funny things I'd say to make her laugh, clever things to make her curious. But when it came to real life, my throat locked up like a rusted gate. I never said a word, never even dared to meet her eyes for longer than a heartbeat. Because deep down, I believe some people lived in different universes. And mine didn't have a place for girls like Lena Matthews. Still, in my quiet way, I carried her with me. Scribbled her name in the margins of my math homework when no one was looking. Stayed late at games just to see her ride away in her bright blue Jeep. Bought a ticket to the school play she was starring in. Sitting way in the back row. Clapping so hard my palms ached. She was a spark that lit up the parts of me I didn't even know existed. The reminder that there was more out there. More life, more light, more something than just my own small, shadowed world. And yet, for her, I was nothing more than another face in a sea of forgettable faces. I thought that was how our story would end. A boy with a quiet heart, a girl made of stardust, Two separate paths that never even brushed against each other. But life, as it turned out, had other plans. Plans that neither of us could have seen coming. Plans that would change everything. Forever. I still remember the day I decided to be brave. It was a crisp fall morning, the kind where the air smells like burnt leaves and new beginnings. I saw her standing by the library steps, sunlight weaving gold into her hair, her laugh floating across the courtyard like a song you never want to end. My heart was a fist beating hard against my ribs. I told myself, today is the day. Today, I wouldn't just admire her from a distance. Today I would speak. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans, forcing my legs to move, one awkward step after another. She was close now, so close that I could see the tiny freckles dusted across her nose, the sparkle in her eyes when she smiled at her friend. I swallowed the lump in my throat, and then, somehow, I found my voice. "Hi," I said. One word. Soft, maybe too soft. But it was there, hanging between us. A fragile bridge I built with everything I had. She didn't hear it. Or maybe she did. I'll never really know. She brushed right past me, not even a glance, as if I was just air, invisible, non-existent. Her shoulder brushed mine lightly, and for a second, I caught a whiff of her perfume. Something sweet and delicate, like vanilla and wildflowers. And then she was gone. Gone like I was never even there. I stood frozen. The crowd swallowed me whole. The world moved on, and I stood there, a ghost in the middle of it all. People rushed past, faces blurring together, voices rising and falling like a tide I couldn't touch. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never be seen again. I told myself it didn't matter, that maybe she was just distracted, that maybe she hadn't heard me. But deep down I knew it wasn't just her, it was everyone. I was invisible, the guy who sat at the back of the class, the one who never got picked for group projects unless the teacher forced it, the one people forgot when they handed out party invites, who walked home alone while others laughed under streetlights. Being invisible isn't like being hated. Hate means you exist enough to stir emotion in someone. Invisibility, it means you're nothing. A shadow, a whisper that no one bothers to hear. That one moment, that small, brutal brush off, it carved itself into me, a scar I knew would never fully heal. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't even about love. It was about existing, being seen, being felt. And for one raw, shattering moment, I realized I wasn't. I was just there, breathing, blinking, hoping, while the world spun faster and faster without me. I walked home that day with my hands stuffed deep in my pockets, head bowed against the cold, each step heavier than the last, each heartbeat quieter, like it didn't know why it was bothering anymore. Maybe it was foolish to think that a single word could change everything. Maybe I was foolish to hope at all. But even then, even after the humiliation, the ache, the crushing silence, a small voice inside me refused to die. It whispered something I didn't yet understand. Maybe, just maybe, invisibility isn't forever. Maybe there's a moment, waiting in the shadows, when someone finally looks and truly sees you. I didn't know it then, but the world had its own plans. And sometimes, the most painful moments are just the beginning of a story you never expected. A story where everything changes. I used to count the cracks in the ceiling of my tiny bedroom every night, wondering if anything would ever change. And now, here I am, years later, a different city, a different face in the mirror, almost a different man. After high school ended, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never, ever feel that powerless again. I would never let the world look at me like I was invisible. The gym became my first refuge. Not because I loved lifting weights, not at first, but because every drop of sweat, every aching muscle, felt like a rebellion, a middle finger to every name they ever called me, every laugh that echoed behind my back. At first, it was pathetic. I couldn't even bench the bar without trembling arms. Old habits die hard. I caught people smirking at me, whispering, and yet I stayed, hour after hour. Day after day, I stayed until the whispers faded into silence. and then into admiration. With every rep, I built something no one could take away from me, self-respect. And it wasn't just my body that changed. It was the way I stood, the way I met a stranger's gaze and didn't flinch away, the way I spoke without second-guessing every word. Somewhere along the way, confidence stopped feeling like an act. It became real. I poured that same hunger into everything I touched. I taught myself coding at night, fueled by cheap coffee and stubborn pride. I started a little side project, a fitness app, ironically enough. A small idea, a small hope. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to build something that mattered, something that I mattered to. And somehow, people noticed. It wasn't a fairy tale success. No overnight millions or anything like that. But the app found a tiny audience, then a community. Enough to pull me out of that suffocating paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. Enough to finally feel like maybe I had something to offer the world. On paper, I was doing well. Better than well. The kid who used to eat lunch alone now got invited to networking events, coffee dates, even parties. Sometimes when I caught my reflection, broad shoulders, sharp jawline, a tired but proud smile, I barely recognized the boy I used to be. And yet, at night, when the noise died down and it was just me and the ceiling again, the old ache crept back in. Success couldn't fill the parts of me that high school had hollowed out. The loneliness I learned to live with had carved out roots too deep to rip out overnight. Somewhere deep inside, that teenage boy still sat by himself at a cafeteria table, pretending not to care. I still caught myself doubting every compliment, still wrestled with the whisper in my head that said, "You're still not enough. They'll leave you too." I had new muscles, a new career, even a shiny new apartment downtown. But some scars aren't visible in the mirror. Some scars whisper louder in success than they ever did in failure. I thought I had rebuilt myself, but I was starting to realize maybe the hardest part wasn't changing the world's view of me. Maybe it was changing the way I saw myself. And just when I thought I had come to terms with it, just when I thought this was as good as it would get, she walked back into my life. Unannounced, unplanned, unforgettable. And suddenly, all the walls I had built so carefully started to crack. I wasn't supposed to be there. Honestly, I almost didn't go. It was one of those gray, heavy afternoons when everything feels just a little bit too loud and too quiet at the same time. I ducked into this small, warm coffee shop on the corner of 7th and Main, somewhere I'd never been before, just looking for a place to breathe. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon hit me, wrapping around my senses. I ordered something, I don't even remember what, and found a table by the window, headphones in, staring out at the drizzle. That's when I saw her. At first, it didn't even register. Just another person walking through the door, brushing the rain from her jacket, laughing softly at something the barista said. But then she turned. That face, those eyes, the memory of her hit me like a punch to the gut. It was her. It was her. I froze, hands clenched around my coffee cup, willing myself not to stare. She was radiant, more alive, more real than any dream I had tortured myself with all these years. Time had only sharpened her beauty, softened her edges in a way that made her somehow even more mesmerizing. She didn't see me at first. She ordered her drink, laughing lightly, pulling her hair into a messy knot that made my chest ache with familiarity. I watched, heart hammering, as she scanned the room for a seat. Her eyes swept right past me. Of course they did. Why would she recognize me now? I wasn't the same boy she had known. Still, some reckless part of me refused to stay silent. As she passed my table, I spoke, barely above a whisper. "Amelia?" She stopped, turned, blinking at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. I watched the confusion twist across her face. Then slowly, recognition bloomed in her eyes. Her lips parted slightly, breath catching. "Liam?" God. Hearing my name in her voice again, it was like the world shifted under my feet. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two strangers with too much history and not enough words. Then she laughed, a soft, astonished sound, and slipped into the seat across from me without asking. Just like that. just like old times. Wow, she said, shaking her head. You look different. I smiled, a little bitter, a little proud. I could say the same about you. But the truth was, it wasn't just the way I looked. It was the way I carried myself now. The boy she had left behind, the one who had adored her from the shadows, he was gone. And from the way she was looking at me now, was something sharp and curious and almost admiring in her gaze. I could tell she felt it too. So, what have you been up to? She asked, sipping her coffee, eyes never leaving mine. I shrugged, playing it cool even though my heart was slamming against my ribs. Living, learning, changing. She smiled, slow and genuine. There was something in that smile I hadn't seen before, something that wasn't pity or nostalgia, something new. You've changed, she said again, softer this time. And in that moment, I realized maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to be the story I had prepared for. Maybe I wasn't the one chasing anymore. Maybe she was. But before I could say anything else, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her smile faltering just slightly. Listen, she said, standing up too quickly. I have to go, but can we meet again? Soon. Hope flared so bright in my chest it almost hurt. I nodded. I'd like that. She scribbled her number on a napkin, pressing it into my hand like a secret. And just like that, she was gone, vanishing into misty evening, leaving me clutching the napkin like it was a lifeline. I sat back, the taste of possibility thick in my mouth. The rules had changed. The game was different now. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I never thought I'd find myself standing across from her again. Not as some lovesick fool chasing a fantasy, but as a friend. It started simple, almost awkward. A random coffee shop meetup that neither of us had really planned. She smiled, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and for a moment, all those old feelings tried to flood back. But I shoved them down hard. This wasn't about romance. Not anymore. We talked about random things at first, music, movies, how weird it was that the seasons fell out of sync lately. There was a weight in the air, though, something unspoken, something fragile. I think we both knew it. And then, somewhere between the second coffee and the quiet laughter, she let her walls crack open, just a little. I used to think, she said, her voice almost too soft for me to catch, that if I was perfect enough, everything would be okay. I leaned in, heart pounding in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't wearing the armor I remembered, the bright, unstoppable girl who lit up every room. No, sitting across from me now was someone human, raw. My family, she paused, biting her lip. They're a mess, honestly. Always have been. I got good at pretending we weren't broken. I didn't interrupt. I just let her speak. Let the words spill like a dam breaking after holding back a flood. She talked about growing up feeling invisible, about parents too busy fighting to notice when she needed them, about the boy who promised her forever, only to leave when she trusted him most. She spoke about nights she cried alone in her room, wondering if something inside her was just unlovable. Every word she said chipped away at the perfect image I had built of her. And strangely, it didn't make me admire her any less. It made me care more. For the first time, I realized she wasn't untouchable. She wasn't this goddess I had to worship from afar. She was a person, scarred, struggling, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with how she looked. I get scared, she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. That if people really knew me, all the messy, broken parts, they'd leave. My chest tightened painfully. God, if only she knew. The cracks in her didn't make me want to run. They made me want to stay, to fight, to be the one person who wouldn't let go. But I said none of that. Instead, I just reached across the table and took her hand. No promises, no grand gestures. Just presence, just understanding. And she squeezed back so tightly, like she was afraid if she let go, she'd disappear again. That night changed something between us. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't dancing around some illusion. We were two broken souls, somehow finding comfort in the pieces we shared. I walked her home under a sky full of bruised purple clouds, our hands brushing once or twice, almost by accident. Neither of us said much, but somehow it felt like everything important had already been spoken. At her door, she turned to me, eyes searching, vulnerable in a way that made my breath hitch. "Thank you," she murmured, "for seeing me." I wanted to tell her how much it meant, how much she meant, but the words caught somewhere deep in my chest, tangled up in fear and hope. So I just smiled and watched as she disappeared inside. Little did I know, this fragile new bond we had built was about to be tested in ways neither of us were ready for. I didn't realize how easy it was, how terrifyingly easy it was, to start falling for her all over again. The way she laughed at my stupid jokes, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she loved. It pulled me in like a riptide. And even though a part of me screamed to swim away, to fight it, I couldn't. I didn't want to. But every sweet moment came with a bitter aftertaste. Late at night, when the world grew quiet and I was left alone with my thoughts, the doubts crept in. Does she only want me because I'm different now? Because I'm not the same awkward, lost version of myself she once knew? Because I can finally look the way I was supposed to? Because I finally have something to offer? The thoughts dug into me, sharp and merciless. I couldn't help but wonder if she would have looked at me this way back then, before the changes, before I learned how to carry myself differently, before life forced me to grow up. Trust. It's funny how quickly it can crack, even when you're desperate to hold on to it. One afternoon, we were sitting in a small cafe downtown, sharing a plate of fries, pretending like the world outside didn't exist. She was talking about some concert she wanted to go to, her voice full of excitement, her hands moving animatedly. I should have been right there with her, caught up in her energy. Instead, my mind twisted her words. Would she even be sitting here if I were still that guy from before? I caught myself staring at her, searching for some hidden agenda that probably wasn't even there. She noticed. Of course she did. Her smile faltered. "What?" she asked, laughing a little, but there was a nervous edge to it. I shrugged, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Nothing, just thinking. Thinking about what? I hesitated. God, I should have just let it go. But something in me snapped, something ugly and small. Do you ever wonder if this is real? If you really like me or just the idea of me? Her face crumpled a little, like I'd slapped her. "Why would you even ask that?" she whispered. I looked away, ashamed, but the damage was already done. The air between us, once warm and full of possibility, turned cold, brittle. We argued in hushed voices, trying not to make a scene. I said things I didn't mean. She said things she probably didn't either. It wasn't a big fight, not the kind you tell your friends about later, laughing it off. No, it was worse than that. It was a slow, aching unraveling. Little things that dug under the skin and stayed there. Afterward, we walked side by side down the street, silent, the space between us heavy with words we were too scared to say. I kept stealing glances at her, trying to read her face. Was she pulling away? Was I pushing her too hard? I hated that I couldn't just let myself be happy. Hated that the fear inside me was stronger than the love trying to grow. But deep down, I knew if I didn't figure out how to trust her and trust myself, I was going to lose her. Maybe I already was. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the sky in bruised colors, I wondered, can two broken people ever really find their way back to each other? And worse, did she even want to? I wish I could tell you that life gives you a warning when your heart's about to shatter again, that you'd hear some kind of siren, feel the earth rumble beneath your feet, something. But no, it was just an ordinary afternoon when I found out. Just a few careless words tossed into the wind by a mutual friend. Words that sliced through me like broken glass. She's seeing someone new. At first, I laughed. I actually laughed. This awkward, nervous chuckle like maybe they were joking. They had to be. She wouldn't do that, not so soon. Not while I was still right here. Still holding on to her memory like a fool holding a rose full of thorns. But no one laughed with me. No one corrected the mistake. The silence around me was heavier than 1,000 bricks. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter, pretending I was fine. But inside, inside I was coming undone. That night, I sat alone on my porch, staring out into nothing. The sky above was this endless stretch of black. Not a single star brave enough to show up. And somehow, it felt like the perfect mirror of what was inside me. Dark, empty, forgotten. She was with someone else now. And I was just a page she'd already turned. Maybe she never looked back. Maybe I was the only one who thought our story still had another chapter waiting. I tried to be angry, tried to hate her, tried to shove every memory of her into the deepest parts of me and lock the door. But the truth was uglier than anger. It was longing. It was a desperate ache of missing her smile, her laugh, even the way she used to roll her eyes when I said something dumb. I missed it all, and I hated myself for it. I started thinking, maybe this was my sign to walk away, to let her go completely, to stop being the guy standing at the edge of a world she no longer lived in. Maybe love, real love, wasn't enough sometimes. Maybe it didn't matter how hard you fought if you were the only one fighting. The thought of walking away twisted my stomach into knots. It felt like ripping pieces of myself out with my bare hands. But what choice did I have? Keep hanging on to someone who had already moved on? Keep breaking my own heart, piece by piece, every day? I sat there for what felt like hours, caught in the war between my heart and my pride. The night grew colder. The world grew quieter. And still I sat, frozen, torn alone. Maybe she had found someone better, someone who made her laugh harder, breathe easier, dream bigger. Maybe I had already lost her long before today, and I was just too blind, too stubborn to see it. But deep down, beneath all the hurt and the pride and the fear, one question kept haunting me. Was it really over, or was there still something left to fight for? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew one thing. Whatever came next, it would either heal me or break me beyond repair. And somehow, I wasn't sure which one I was more afraid of. I don't know when exactly the excitement faded and the fear began. At first, it was little things. A sharp word here, a jealous look there. I told myself it was passion, that maybe love was supposed to feel a little messy. But soon, the arguments started spilling into every corner of my life. It felt like I couldn't breathe without it being wrong. I tried to smile through it, pretend it was normal, but inside, I was crumbling. One night, after another ugly fight, this one louder, meaner than all the ones before, I found myself standing outside, shivering in the cold. I didn't even have a jacket. I had run out the door without thinking, the sound of his shouting still ringing in my ears. Tears blurred my vision, my hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone as I pulled it from my pocket. I didn't know who to call. I just knew I couldn't go back in there. Not tonight. My fingers moved before my mind caught up, scrolling, searching, and then there was his name. The one person who had always felt like home, even when I didn't realize it. I hesitated, heart pounding. Would he even pick up? Would he even care after everything? Before I could lose my nerve, I pressed call. It rang once, twice. I almost hung up. Then his voice came through, soft and full of surprise. Hey, you okay? That broke me. The tears came faster now, pouring down my face as I tried to form words. I need help. I choked out. No hesitation. Where are you? I gave him the address, my voice trembling. He said he'd be there in 15 minutes. And somehow, just hearing that, just knowing he was coming, made the world feel a little less impossible. The wait felt like hours, but suddenly headlights swept across the street. He jumped out his car, jogging over to me with that familiar, worried look. God, you're freezing, he murmured, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders without asking. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself lean into someone who didn't yell, someone who didn't make me feel small. He didn't ask questions. He just opened the car door and waited, patient and steady, until I climbed inside. We drove in silence at first. I stared out the window, trying to hold myself together, trying to stop shaking. He kept glancing over at me, his hands tight on the steering wheel. like he wanted to say something but didn't want to push. Finally, when we pulled into the parking lot of an old diner, the kind we used to sneak into after midnight back when the world felt lighter, he turned the engine off. He looked at me, really looked. "You didn't have to call me," he said, voice low. "But I'm glad you did." I swallowed hard, emotions threatening to drown me. I didn't know who else to call. I whispered. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I could ever put into words. And then it hit him. I saw it in the way his eyes softened, the way he leaned just a little closer. She trusts me. Maybe she always needed someone real. He didn't say it out loud, but I could feel it in the space between us. In the quiet way, he just was there. No expectations, no judgment. Just there. I clutched the jacket tighter around me, my heart thudding painfully against my ribs. Was this what it was supposed to feel like? Not fireworks, not chaos, but a steady, unwavering kind of warmth? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure as I sat there, breathing in the scent of coffee and rain and memories. Everything was about to change. I could feel my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might shake the quiet night around us. We stood there alone, under a sky dusted with 1,000 trembling stars. The air was cool against my skin, but it wasn't the chill that made me shiver. It was her. It was this moment. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. She wasn't looking at me. Instead, she stared down at the ground like it held the answers she couldn't say aloud. I waited, my breath caught somewhere between hope and fear. I didn't dare speak. I didn't want to break whatever fragile thing was unfolding between us. Finally, her voice, barely more than a whisper, broke through the stillness. "I always felt something for you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. For a long time, my chest tightened. The words sinking deep into a part of me I tried to keep guarded for too long. She squeezed her eyes shut like it hurt to keep going. "But I never thought I deserved someone like you." Her voice cracked, and suddenly she was blinking back tears. I took a step closer, my instinct to reach out to her battling the fear that she might pull away. I wanted to tell her, God, I wanted to scream that she was wrong, that she had always deserved to be loved, to be chosen, to be seen. But she needed to say this. She needed to let it out. "You were always..." She shook her head, her voice breaking into a choked sob. "Good, kind, everything I thought I wasn't worthy of." A tear slipped down her cheek, catching the faint silver light from the stars. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing away with my thumb. She flinched, not away from me, but into my touch, like she had been starved for it. I felt my own throat tighten, the emotions too big, too heavy to contain. "Hey!" I whispered, my voice rough with the tears I was fighting back. "You're not broken. You're not less. You're everything." Her lips trembled. She looked up at me for the first time, her eyes shining, desperate and full of a lifetime of unsaid words. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The world around us seemed to hold its breath, waiting, and then, slowly, like she was afraid it might all vanish if she moved too fast, she leaned in. Our lips met in a kiss that wasn't perfect or practiced. It was messy, tear-soaked, trembling. It was real. Every unspoken word, every silent hope, every buried feeling passed between us in that kiss. It was like finding home in someone else's arms. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine, breathing hard, her fingers clutching the front of my shirt like she never wanted to let go. "I'm scared," she whispered. So quietly it was almost just a breath against my lips. "Me too," I said back, my hands framing her face. "But I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." She let out a shaky laugh, part sob, part relief, and I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this moment would change everything. But deep down, a tiny flicker of fear still gnawed at the edges of my heart. Because love was never simple. And the road ahead for us wouldn't be either. Not with everything still left unsaid. Not with the secrets still hiding between us. I held her tighter, wondering how much strength we would need to face what was coming next. I'll never forget the way her eyes sparkled that night, The night I asked her the most important question of my life. It wasn't some grand spectacle. No fireworks. No choreographed flash mob. Just the two of us, standing barefoot on the worn wooden floor of our first apartment. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee, and the city lights bled soft gold through the cracked windows. My hands were trembling so much, I could barely open the little velvet box I had been carrying around for weeks. She laughed when she saw it, the kind of laugh that melts every fear, every doubt. And then she cried. Through tear-soaked eyes, she said yes, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like it had always been me. The girl who once barely noticed I existed chose me for life. The wedding was small, almost too small by most people's standards. Just a handful of people who truly mattered, gathered in a sun-drenched garden tucked behind an old library downtown. It smelled of fresh-cut roses and old paperbacks, a strange but perfect mix that somehow matched us. She wore a simple dress, no glittering tiara, no long cathedral veil, just a soft ivory gown that hugged her like a whispered promise. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and she walked toward me barefoot, like some wild, beautiful dream I was afraid I might wake up from. When she reached me, she didn't say a word. She just smiled, and in that moment I knew we weren't just promising love. We were promising home. Our vows were clumsy, half laughed, half cried. Her voice cracked when she said, "I promise to choose you, even when I don't feel like choosing anything." Mine broke when I said, "I promise to love you, even when the world feels like it's falling apart." And somehow, standing there in front of the people who knew every scar and bruise on our hearts, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. The reception was even less formal. We danced barefoot on the grass under fairy lights strung between old oak trees. There was no DJ, no fancy catering, just a borrowed speaker and a playlist we made together the night before. I remember spinning her around under the stars, her laughter filling the night like music. I remember thinking, if happiness had a sound, it would be her laughing with her head thrown back like that. There was a moment later that night when we slipped away from the crowd. We sat side by side on the cool stone steps behind the library, eating leftover wedding cake straight from the box with our fingers. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her hair smelling like vanilla and rain. "This is it," she whispered. "This is all I ever wanted." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was chasing something that was always out of reach. She was here. She was mine. And I was hers. Forever wasn't a scary word anymore. It was the sweetest promise we'd ever made. But even as we sat there, wrapped up in the golden glow of our brand new forever, life was already waiting for us. Unwritten, unpredictable, and not all of it would be beautiful. But at that moment, none of that mattered. Because no matter what came next, we were stepping into it together. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "This is just the beginning." I used to believe that once you find the right person, the hard part is over, that love would just carry us like a river carries a leaf. But life is never that simple. It's funny how no one prepares you for what happens after the fairy tale. No one tells you that some mornings you'll wake up next to the person you love most in this world and still feel like you're standing oceans apart. We had built a life together, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, whispered promises at midnight. We talked about kids. We planned for them like we planned for everything else. Naively, confidently, hopefully, but month after month, it was just silence, empty rooms, negative tests, hope splintering into 1,000 tiny, invisible pieces I didn't know how to pick up anymore. At first, we laughed it off. Maybe next month, we said, squeezing each other's hands a little too tightly. But over time, the silence grew heavier. Every empty cradle in a store window, every passing stroller, every tiny sock in the mall. It felt like the world was mocking us. And the worst part wasn't the tests or the doctors or the needles. It wasn't even the waiting. It was seeing the way he looked at me sometimes, like he was trying so hard not to show his own sadness, like he was holding the weight of my pain too. One night, after another long appointment that ended with nothing but more questions, we sat in the car in the parking lot. the radio buzzing low in the background. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. The distance between us was a living, breathing thing. I turned to him, feeling broken, useless, lost. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see anger. I didn't see disappointment. I saw him, raw and real, his own fears, his own heartbreak, all wrapped up in a love he still had for me, a love that hadn't faltered. Even when the road got so impossibly hard, he reached across the console, took my hand in his, and whispered, "No matter what, I choose you." And in that moment, I realized something they never tell you in the movies. Love isn't about grand gestures or perfect endings. It's not about fireworks or fairy tale moments. It's about the quiet choice to stay. It's about seeing someone, truly seeing them, even when the world feels like it's falling apart. Our love story wasn't broken. It was still being written, messy, painful, beautiful. Maybe life wouldn't give us everything we dreamed of. Maybe our road would look different from what we planned. But love, real love, isn't about being noticed once. It's about being seen, truly seen, every single day. And in his eyes I knew I was still seen, still chosen, still loved. But little did I know, life had one more twist waiting just around the corner.